Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our session here at the 2021 ESEA Conference, Educating for Tomorrow. Today's session is going to focus on equity and access for CSI campuses through leveraging innovative live one-to-one online instruction and spotlighting Baltimore City Public Schools. I'd like to introduce our presenters today. Dr. Mark King, Executive Director of Instruction for Baltimore City Public Schools and leader of Community Learning Network 6, Mr. Daniel Hebert of FEV Tutor, Senior Director of Innovation and Growth, and myself, Ryan Patnod, Senior Vice President and co-founder of FEV Tutor.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Mark King. Currently, I'm an Instructional Leadership Executive Director in Baltimore City Public Schools. I supervise 15 different campuses, including 3 standalone middle schools. There are 2 schools that are grades 3 through 8. There are 5 pre-K 5 campuses, as well as 5 pre-K through 8 campuses.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Hebert. I'm the Senior Director of Innovation and Growth with FEV Tutor. My background is in education. I'm a former teacher and instructional coach. I have experience working in critical needs school districts. And my role now at FEV Tutor is to work hand in hand with K-12 school districts like Baltimore City Schools to collaborate and to align our one-to-one tutoring programs closely with their core instructional strategies and initiatives. I'm excited to present with Dr. King today and provide a little bit of context from FEV Tutor's end in regards to our partnered tutoring program and some of the innovative practices that Dr. King has spearheaded over there in Baltimore.
Hello and welcome again, everyone. My name is Ryan Patnod, Senior Vice President and co-founder of FEV Tutor. FEV Tutor was founded with the vision to affect positive change in K-12 education. Coming from a family of public educators myself, our mission and vision is to impact as many students as we can across the country and make the most change possible. Through that work comes the opportunity to work with priority student groups like Title I, English language learners, and migrant students for overall district and school improvement and transformation. We've been a part of the ESEA network for many years now and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Today's presentation is going to be a spotlight on an innovative large urban district ecosystem. Dr. Mark King is going to talk to us about inherent challenges and initiatives at Baltimore City Schools, including working with his own comprehensive school improvement campuses during COVID-19, and how he leveraged technology and innovation to accelerate learning outcomes, engage students, and continue learning during a very difficult time. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Mark King, Executive Director of Instruction for Community Learning Network 6 at Baltimore City Schools.
Baltimore City, we have about 80,000 total students. Most of the students are Black or Brown students. And particularly in my network, all of the schools are Title I schools. All 15 are Title I schools. 7 of those schools, actually 8, since I've added the middle schools, 8 of those schools are comprehensive school improvement campuses based on a designation by the Maryland State Department of Education. Those schools are Alexander Hamilton, Booker T. Washington Middle School, Calverton, which is the 3rd grade through 8th grade campus, Sandtown Winchester Achievement Academy, which is a pre-K through 8. Harlem Park is a pre-K through 8 also. Vanguard Collegiate Middle School, grades 6, 7, and 8. Utah Marshburn is an elementary school, which is a pre-K 5. And Cherry Hill Elementary Middle School, which is 3rd grade through 8th grade. Cherry Hill is the only campus that I have that has a bit more diversity than the other campuses, as it has a 0.5 ELL teacher because they're starting to get an influx of students where English is the second language. Other than that, all of the campuses are predominantly African American, mostly up to about 90 to 95%. clearly a connection between the social and emotional needs of the student and the academic performance. I've seen this when I worked in the District of Columbia Public Schools, where I worked for 7 years, and I was the instructional superintendent for middle schools. So there are similarities across urban districts, and one of them is the social and emotional needs of the children and the things that they bring to the actual school that affect the academic performance. One thing that Baltimore City has done is created a social and emotional learning program, which comes from our Office of Student Learning. I'm sorry, Office of the Whole Child, which is under the supervision of Dr. Sarah Warren. So one thing we've done in 1, 2, 3 of my schools, particularly, we have what's called a student wholeness specialist that works with students along the social emotional needs that they bring to school with. I have several schools that are implementing mindfulness, so they're working to get students into the right frame of mind before starting the instructional day. I would say 12 to 13 of my schools also start with a morning meeting where students just get to have a conversation with the students before they get into the actual learning. So there are a lot of things we're trying to put in place to address the social and emotional needs before we actually touch the academic needs. Prior to COVID, one thing that we were working on was student attendance, because you have to get them in school in order to get them in a position where they can be successful. The thing that has jumped out to me as far as once we got into the COVID situation is the equity issue that we're trying to address, because it became so apparent that there were equity issues across our system and across all urban school districts. So in order to try to address those equity issues, what we did, we allocated funds so each individual student can get their own laptop, and that way they can access the virtual learning. So that has been a huge lift, and one of the things that has really changed, because a lot of the students, they do their standardized testing and things like that online, so they're acclimated to it. But systemically, we had to go a step further to ensure that they had access to what the teachers were doing virtually, which required us to give students individual laptops. And in some cases, hotspots, because internet access was also an issue. So we worked through that, and I think we're in a place now where we're seeing progress as far as students being able to engage online with the teacher. So that is the biggest lift that I've seen pre-COVID, and since we've been in this situation to where we have students at home virtually. At this point now, we're working on a plan to bring back our kindergarten, first and second graders, trying to do that the week of February 16th. Now, we do have an SOP, standard operating procedure, that was developed by Johns Hopkins, the University of Maryland Medical System, input from Morgan State, as well as the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So it's about a 40-page document, and we took that and we started to implement in-person learning sites over the summer at Sandtown Winchester, which is actually one of the CSI schools that piloted that program. And then we took that and then we started to create student learning centers where the students of parents who are first responders who had to go to work, they could bring their children in and then they would get the instruction virtually in an actual school. So the plan from the summer, moving from that SOP, has now gotten us to a place to where we're trying to bring back our kindergarten, first and second graders, but it's optional because some parents are still not comfortable sending their children to schools. So we're starting to give that option to parents now, and then we're having conversations around what that would actually look like in buildings. And then we'll try to build that out. So at the end of the month, we'll try to bring back, or we'll give the option for our third, fourth, and fifth grade teachers to come in and students to come in, and we try to build out from there.
Excellent, Dr. King. Sounds like a lot of innovation.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift. It really is.
Especially for a system of your magnitude and demographic, but it sounds like it's progressive.
Yeah, we are making progress, and there are some very different things around different schools. For example, we have an early literacy program under Heather Bowles. She works for John Davis, who's the chief of school. And she also works under Teaching and Learning with Janice Lane. So what we've done, we're trying to have a strong focus on the early literacy piece. So 5 of the schools in my network are actually piloting this early literacy work. So it includes specific plans for individual students. Students are progress monitored every 3 weeks to see if they progress based on the amplified data that we're using to create these small groups. So we progress monitor that every Wednesday. We also have 5 other schools in the network, which are MTSS schools, multi-tier systems of support. So we're doing that at 5 schools. It's on top of the other 5 schools that we're working with along the early literacy piece. And there are also 3 CSI schools, total of 4, that are strategic climate support schools. So systemically, we provide them with the culture and climate coach to work with their teachers and their students on how to create a climate that's conducive to learning. But there's a lot of innovative things along the lines in these 15 schools that we've been working on to try to prove outcomes for students.
When we designed the FEV Tutor model, we did so in a way that was intended to integrate with the ecosystem of our school district partners like Baltimore City Schools. And so Dr. King is mentioning many innovative practices that he is spearheading with his site leaders in the Community Learning Network number 6, including some innovative social emotional learning practices, mindfulness practices, and a few others that he mentioned. When we designed the FEV Tutor product, we did so with social emotional learning in mind as well, so that we can really, connect with and reinforce existing SEL initiatives that our school districts are already spearheading. We also are doing things like, keeping students matched with the same instructor from lesson to lesson, from week to week, in order to build a rapport and a working relationship together so that students feel confident and comfortable in the tutor that they're working with and can really scaffold and build. It also keeps students coming back because attendance and student engagement is so critically important, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic and response time. So keeping students matched with the same tutor, using SEL practices, keeps them engaged. Students are getting small victories along the way. Our tutors are awarding students with what we call participation points to provide some added motivation and confidence building. Much of our work gravitates towards those areas of the highest need. So we're talking about, students who in many cases are multiple grade levels behind in math, English, and other areas. So threading in those SEL practices is key. And then again, integrating it with existing initiatives and SEL practices like Dr. King is describing here. So it's all building and reinforcing upon each other.
Well, we could start with before and after school programs. We've tried both. The problem with those programs were they were not directly aligned to the curriculum. But as you know, we implement Wit and Wisdom and Eureka for our K through 8s. So the after school programs and before school programs were not directly aligned with what was going on during the course of the day. So there was a disconnect, which also led to, and I don't want to say confusion, but it was not a cohesive system to student improvement. For example, if the math teacher was working on division, the after school person or coordinator may be working on multiplication. So we're working hard, but there was no cohesiveness to the actual daytime program into the after school program or the before school program. So we had to try to align those, which was difficult because we had to get them access to the curriculum. They need the pace and guide to see exactly where we are. So that really didn't work well. We also had programs where we would stop the school day and students would go to individual teachers for individual sessions. But what we found was that took instructional time out of the school day and was not yielding the results that we needed. So we tried to find something that was flexible enough for the teachers to use, but was also flexible enough and geared towards student interest and produce student outcomes. So that's how we kind of ran into a conversation about students being online with an individual tutor that can give individual feedback and have conversation with students and almost create a relationship, almost like an additional teacher. And the teacher can simply tell the tutor exactly what areas they were working on or where marking was deficient. And as a result, the tutor can pick up from the lesson that the teacher delivered right into the tutoring program. And based on the conversations, one of the best things about the program, according to me and several of the teachers, is the fact that the hours are not tied to a child particularly. The hours are given to a school, and the school can utilize those hours in various ways. So if Mark King is absent today and he should be on FEV tutoring, then another student has the opportunity to take that hour and still get that support that that they need. Initially, and you all know this well, federal funds were tied to research-based programs. So in looking at programs that were research-based, one deficiency that we noticed was a lot of the research was not done in schools that looked like Baltimore City Public Schools. So when ESEA and Title I moved to evidence-based, it became a lot easier and a lot more clear as far as what you could use to improve outcomes for students. So initially, after a conversation with the chief of schools, John Davis, he put me in touch with Lori Lynn Sutton, who's in charge of our cooperative school improvement schools. And she works directly with MSDE. And what they started to do was create a catalog of evidence-based programs that schools could access if they were designated a CSI school by the Maryland State Department of Education. So once she started to create the catalog, you then have to talk to the Office of Achievement and Accountability, because there has to be research done on the evidence that is presented by the individual vendor. So understanding the amount of money that CSI school gets from Title I and from the State Department of Education, it's an arduous process to get on that actual vendor list to become a vendor who can access those funds based on the evidence that is presented. Once you go through Lori Lynn's office, and then you go through the Office of Achievement and Accountability, which is under the purview of Dr. Teresa Jones, then there's a Board of Commissioners review. And after the Board of Commissioners reviews and approves it, then you become an official vendor, and CSI schools can access federal funds in order to implement programs in the school to improve student achievement. Well, once approval was given by the chief of schools, I was able to have a meeting with the principals and allow them to see the product and ask questions about, for instance, how many hours do you get? What is the right recommendation of sessions and things of that nature? And the product pretty much sold itself. So it wasn't a matter of me trying to convince principals to do what I thought was best. It was a matter of allowing them access to see what was out there and then them making a determination of if they wanted to utilize that to improve outcomes for students. And I didn't try to get into the micromanagement of how it would be scheduled. So every school that uses FEV tutoring uses it in their own particular way. There are some schools that have built it into their resource schedule. So it's an academic resource class. Some schools use it as an after school program. Some schools use it before school. Some schools use it in conjunction with a substitute teacher if a teacher is out. So there are a lot of different ways to use the program. And I think that's one of the best things about it. As I said, it's not so lockstep to where you have to do A, B, and C. But what we did learn through the research over the course of the years that we've been using it is fidelity to the model is extremely important when you're talking about the number of sessions that a child is on in order to get the outcome that you would like to see. So I think that is one thing that we didn't really know walking in, but once students started using it and we started looking at the data of those students who used it more than 15 times, we could see improvement in those students as compared to those students who you only use it 5 to 7 times.
Many of our district partners, such as Baltimore City Schools, are employing evidence-based decision-making processes. And so when at FEV Tutor designing our implementation framework, we did so in a way that was meant to sync up with those evidence-based decision-making processes. And so one example of that in this context is as we started to meet with Dr. King and his site leaders, we kicked off what we call a collaborative academic program design process. So our academic success team actually went out and physically met in person with each of the site leaders, and together established some shared outcome goals for the program, started to analyze some assessment data and curriculum resources. So we were essentially working together to develop a highly targeted tutoring program that synced up with each school's instructional priorities, and then identified target student cohorts that would benefit the most from the one-to-one support, and constructed an implementation plan and timeline that worked for each and was customized for each school site. Along the way, as part of those implementation plans, like Dr. King mentioned, gaining buy-in from all key stakeholders is extremely important in terms of the fidelity of the implementation. And so we employ a team of academic success coaches who are working hand in hand with instructional leaders, teachers, and others at each school site to not only plan the program out on the front end, but to act as a resource for ongoing collaboration. So as tutoring starts occurring, we're actually feeding progress monitoring data back to teachers, back to instructional leaders. And then our academic success coaches are working hand in hand with them to share best practices and share recommendations for how we can maximize program effectiveness. And so that's, sort of living and breathing collaboration that Dr. King spearheaded on the front end by putting us in touch with his site leaders, and then sort of just took off from there. Baltimore City Schools, is a prototype example of that type of, collaborative implementation process. And now during, the COVID-19 pandemic, much of our collaboration is falling heavily in the area of family and student engagement, trying to overcome a lot of those barriers that exist that prevent students from connecting with remote learning, access to technology, access to internet, things of that nature. So we have a department called our Family and Student Engagement Team, who reaches out on behalf of Baltimore City Schools to speak with a family over the phone, consult them academically, work together on a personalized tutoring schedule and plan, and really do so as a direct extension of the district and of each school site as part of a collaborative outreach approach. And so in the process of doing that, we've been able to overcome a lot of the barriers that exist, preventing students from connecting with remote learning, and act as a catalyst for engagement in remote learning moving forward.
We looked at it along the course of the year, but understanding that different schools start at different times. So we tried to progress monitor as we went through and make a determination as to who was being successful. So we used things like the end of module assessments in Eureka Math, or the end of module assessments in Wit and Wisdom. So we started to look at those assessments, and then through the course of the year, we looked at grades, we looked at participation rates, and then we looked at each individual student to see how they were performing. And by the time we got to the statewide assessment, we noticed that most of the students who used it 15 or more times were able to move up a level from where they were previously. Now, everybody did not jump to advanced, let's be honest, but those were not the students that we were actually targeting. We were targeting students that we could move through the course of the year. So there was improvement along the spectrum as far as how students worked year to year. So that gave us evidence that this actually works, and created another conversation about, okay, now, if we implemented it last year, did we implement it with fidelity? And then that led to bigger conversations about how the implementation looks, when do we use it, who are we targeting, things of that nature. And we did see some success.
One aspect of our partnership with Baltimore City Schools, and an integral part to many of our tutoring programs, is we've worked closely on a growth and impact analysis. So we've worked hand in hand with several folks in the Achievement and Accountability Office to look at FEV Tutor participation up against tangible measures of student achievement. During the first year of our partnership, the state assessment in Maryland at the time was the PARCC assessment. And so when Dr. King and his principals designed year one of the tutoring program, it was done so with intention so that we could move the needle on student achievement according to the spring math and ELA PARCC assessments for 3rd through 8th grade students participating in FEV Tutor. What we saw at the end of the academic year, like Dr. King described, is an increase in proficiency rates, specifically for those students who participated in the recommended dosage of FEV Tutor. So students who attended 15 or more tutoring hours saw the highest rates of growth. There was growth across the board, which was excellent to see, but the performance level was actually a full level plus higher for students who participated in the recommended dosage, which was incrementally more than other FEV Tutor participants who were coming in at slightly lower dosages, and then significantly more than non-participants. Moving forward in our partnership, we've continued to evaluate program outcomes based off of multiple measures of student achievement, including benchmark assessments like the iReady diagnostic, which is used across the board in Baltimore at many school sites, and continuing to look at state assessment data. We're committed to ongoing research and evaluation, and really using tangible measures of student achievement that matter to school districts, like PARCC, iReady, Maryland state assessments in the case of Baltimore City Schools.
I can remember vividly going into a building that was a CSI school, the historic Samuel Coleridge Taylor, which has Betty Adams as the current principal. And there was a substitute who was using the online tutoring program. And the students were actively engaged, and you could see the looks on their faces because they're having a conversation with somebody based on exactly what they're doing, and the feedback that they get that I receive weekly about what students are saying about the tutor and the interaction. So it's not really an aha moment, but it's a continuous feedback loop that kind of lets me know that we're on the right track as far as what we're doing. And this is one innovation that I can see us continuing to use moving forward, simply based on the results that it has achieved. And I think one of the best things about students learning virtually now was because a lot of them already had this this computerized tutoring prior to COVID. So once they got a laptop at home, they were accustomed already to logging on and working one-on-one with somebody. So I think that also helped the teaching process post-COVID. I think it's a great partnership. It's personable and it's relevant. But I think one word that really sticks out to me is customized. It can be customized for any individual school, any individual district, urban, suburban, rural. So I don't think it fits into a specific box, so to speak, as this only works for this population or this only works for this population. The ability to customize it and use it for individual schools based on the individual school needs is one of the things that I think that is really powerful about it.
Hi, my name is Rachel Donegan. I'm the Assistant Director for Promise Heights. We're using FEV tutoring in all 5 of our community schools. We use them at elementary, middle, and high school level to boost individual student learning and to give kids some one-on-one time. We are super excited to partner with FEV. We appreciate all of their out-of-the-box thinking, and they really help us problem solve around attendance and incentives and learning strategies and how to work with teachers. We can't recommend them enough.
I would recommend FEV tutoring to other schools looking to accelerate learning because it not only is individualized to each student and their learning needs, it's extremely accessible in the online platform, and it leaves that personal touch of having a student talk to a real person.
Hi there, this is Principal Cooper of Alexander Hamilton Elementary School and partner of FEV Tutor, affectionately called the Fever in our school community. We began our partnership with FEV 2 years ago to close our learning gap for our struggling students in ELA and math, identify the standards that we were struggling with as a school, and to support our data goals in part. They were so effective, I brought them with me to our new school as they continue to impact those data points and attendance and student engagement in the virtual world. I highly recommend FEV.
I think it's important to understand that all the answers are not in a book. I think it's also important to empower principals and listen to them and their ideas because they do a lot of research as well. I think it's important that as the instructional leader of 15 schools, you understand the dynamics of each individual building, as well as the demographics and the teaching staff and things of that nature. But I also think it's important that you allow principals the opportunity to think outside the box as well. We have some principals who have done some research and found some very interesting tools that they can use in their buildings. So I try not to hinder the implementation, but I do want to have a conversation prior to see, okay, where was this innovation? Are the children who were served similar to the children that we serve? And then we can have a conversation about the results that were achieved by any innovation, because you have to constantly monitor or you won't see the type of results that you get or that you need to get. So it's a constant monitoring process that allows you to ascertain whether you're on the right track or if you need to make a switch or course correct. So I think the key is just being open and listening to those that are actually in the buildings, as well as working with those outside of school systems to see what is working in other urban school districts, similar to Baltimore City Public Schools. I will say is you can't be a great leader if you can't follow. And I've been fortunate enough to be put in the position where I work for great leaders. Dr. Santelises is wonderful to work with. My direct supervisor, John Davis, I've worked with him since he was in the District of Columbia Public Schools, and now he's the chief of schools here. So you can't lead if you can't follow. And given the opportunity to work with and follow great leaders has molded me and kind of shaped me into who I am. So I'm at a point now to where we can have hard conversations about innovations that we need to try or things that we want to do. And we can have that real conversation, and there's an honest conversation. Sometimes the answer is no, let's be clear. But there also are times when sometimes the answer is like, well, you know what, let's pilot this. Let's see what this looks like in a small group. So I guess the main takeaway I have is, besides you can't lead if you can't follow, is not to be scared. Because when you're scared, you don't take chances. You continue to do the same thing because it's safe. You can't always do the same thing because it's safe, because you always get the same results. So you have to think outside the box, and you have to take students where they're willing to go, and you have to take teachers and principals where they're willing to go. And everybody's willing to be successful. Are we putting them in a position to be successful? And in Baltimore City Public Schools, I think we are.
As we close today's presentation, we just wanted to thank everyone for being here today, for your communication, for your collaboration, and for being interested in learning more about Baltimore City Schools, their innovative district ecosystem, and instructional strategies on driving and accelerating student achievement during pandemic circumstances and with our comprehensive school improvement campuses. To follow up and learn more about Baltimore City or talk to Dr. King about his experience with the live one-on-one online tutoring instructional strategy, please feel free to contact him directly. To learn more about FEV Tutor, please visit us at our ESEA virtual booth and/or contact us directly. Lastly, we wanted to thank each and every one of you for your leadership on the front lines of K-12 education during an unprecedented time. We are grateful for your service, your support, and in awe of your work thus far. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great day.